Hello, I am Dr. Buser, and we will be talking today about Volume 2 in the collected works of Marie-Louise von Franz. This is an ongoing series we're putting together of brief videos on the various volumes in the collected works, and today we'll be talking about Volume 2. I'm Dr. Buser. I'm a psychiatrist working currently in the field of addiction, psychiatry. After medical school, I was in the Air Force for a number of years. I later studied for 2 years at the C.G. Jung Institute in Chicago, founded the Asheville Jung Center, and currently I'm one of the co-owners of Chiron Publications. During her final years, Marie-Louise von Franz expressed the wish that her writings might one day appear in the form of a collected works. And that's what we're doing today. We are trying to pull together all the writings of Marie-Louise von Franz and bring them together in a collected works. This will be a 28-volume, 10-year project, and we are just beginning. So we've done the first 3 volumes, and we hope to keep going over the next 10 years. Much of this material is brand new, never released in English before. Parts of it are revised and reworked, and some of it is simply republished. These are the first 3 volumes that have already been released: Archetypal, Symbols, and Fairytales. The first one looks at background images and archetypal figures. The second one looks at the hero's journey, and the third one looks at the heroine's journey. So today we're going to talk about Volume 2 in the collected works. This is the front cover, including a drawing by Martina Ott, representing some of the images within the volume. The constellated archetype that steers and determines the inner course of events is most commonly represented in fairy tales as the great journey, the adventurous quest to find the precious treasure that is hardest to reach. This is a symbol of the self, and this journey, interpreted psychologically, is the process of inner development or individuation. In Volume 1, we looked at the 4 archetypal others: the great mother, demonic father, the magical daughter, and the demonic son, and how the hero or heroine is in the middle of this, engaging with the 4 archetypal others. Now, I'm going to summarize one of the fairy tales that von Franz talks about in Volume 2. It's called The 3 Feathers. For the extended 2-hour version of the seminar, where we go into much more detail, we read the entire fairy tale to get a deeper perspective of it. But for brevity, I'm going to give you a summary of the fairy tale. It begins with a king and 3 sons. The king is getting old, ailing, and will die soon, and he needs to choose the successor. There are 2 older brothers that are more accomplished, and there's the youngest brother who's just simply called the simpleton. He rarely speaks, and people see him as an inferior son. The father, king, gives 3 tasks for the 3 sons. The first task is to bring the most beautiful carpet to him. The second task is to bring the most beautiful ring. And the third task, the most beautiful woman. And he who brings home the most prized objects is to be the one to be crowned king. To make it fair, he takes 3 feathers and he blows them from the kingdom, out of the castle gate. And each son follows a feather where it goes. One of the feathers goes to the left, one to the right, and one falls straight down. Unfortunately, the simpleton has to follow the feather that falls to the ground. He sits down in despair, thinking there's nothing to be found there, until he notices a trap door underneath. He opens the trap door, goes down, and enters the kingdom of the toad. He asks the toad for these objects one at a time, and the toad simply gives them to him. The most beautiful woman takes a little bit longer, but the toad transforms one of her daughters into the most beautiful woman. Each of the sons brings back their prizes. The older sons bring home very mediocre things, and it is clear by the end of the final task that the simpleton is the one to be declared king. There is a flipping of a tetrad in this story. The tetrad is the king and the 3 sons, making up a foursome. The king is initially in the ego consciousness and the principal function. The elder sons are kind of in the wings, and the youngest son, the simpleton, is in the unconscious. He's in the inferior position and is looked down upon by all in the kingdom initially. Now, this perspective flips in the end of the fairy tale as the king dies, his ego consciousness goes towards unconsciousness, and the simpleton becomes the hero and the new king, and his unconscious elements come forth into consciousness, with that. So again, there's this tetrad, the king and the three sons. The youngest son is inferior, despised, ignored, ridiculed, and this quaternity represents a wholeness. It's a psychic image of the self. Like the four seasons and the four quarters of heaven, the four elements are a quaternity system of orientation, which always expresses a whole. The orienting system of consciousness has four aspects, which correspond to the four empirical functions: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. This quaternity is an archetypal arrangement. So von Franz has taken the tetrad quaternity, described in the fairy tale, and connecting it with the typological, functions: sensation, intuition, feeling, thinking, and how one of these typological functions is always in the inferior unconscious pole, and this correlates that same pattern. So again, the tetralogy is the king and the three sons. There's a failure of the prevailing consciousness. The king is growing stale and rigid, and this inferior unconscious element needs to come forth to add to completeness. The king blows three feathers in the three directions and orders his sons to follow them. This action is similar to consulting an oracle. Fate is left to chance. That is, it is entrusted to the soul. The individual must desperately resist the dictates of reason and give up the supremacy of egohood. The simpleton follows his feather into the depths. The feather falls in the trapdoor. He opens the trapdoor. He descends into the depths. He's entering the unconscious elements into the earth at that point. The first test is the most beautiful carpet. The king wishes for the most beautiful carpet, whose knotting of colored threads can be understood as a colorful life, with all its entanglements and embroilments. The king is longingly expressing that he has succumbed to a lifeless rigidity and has distanced himself too far from the roots of life. The carpet is a fabric, and thus a product of the Great Mother, nature's weaver. The colorfulness of the sought-after carpet indicates the diversity and fullness of life. This often happens in the second half of life. We become too one-sided, too rigid, too encrusted, and there's something from the unconscious soulfulness that has to break forward. And this is the simpleton in this story. Test number 2 is the most beautiful ring. There's a progression from the carpet to the ring to the woman. A ring is an integral whole. It's a circular shape like a mandala. It's a symbol of the self. The ring is a symbol of bonds and relationships, especially the relationship between body and soul. Like the carpet, the ring stands for the connection to the feminine principle. Test number 3 is the most beautiful woman. This is an anima element. The three sons need to go and find the most beautiful woman, and the simpleton succeeds in this and is connecting, in essence, to his anima, who he brings back into the kingdom. There's a new kingdom. This kingdom is then restored into a newness of life. The last part of this video, I want to briefly talk about the endings. Von Franz pulls together, this volume at the end by looking at the end of a fairy tale and how that notes the level of individuation of the hero or the heroine in the story. The sequence in a fairy tale has a formal, necessary conclusion. The specific way in which these endings are depicted indicates, from the psychological point of view, to what extent the tale represents a process of individuation. So fairy tales start in everyday life. They enter a magical part of the kingdom, and then they return back to everyday life, just as the reader starts in everyday life, dives into, immerses themselves into the magical story, and then comes out of the fairy tale back to everyday life. Now, in the tale itself, the hero or heroine can end in the magical, or they can end in the secular. And if they end in the secular, they can have something brought back, something of value, or they might not. So some fairy tales end in the magical. The hero disappears into the magical realm. He might disappear into Anima's palace, into the underground, or the animal kingdom. He does not come back to his village or the place where he started. This represents entering fully into the unconscious and not returning. This is usually a tragic loss of the individual. Or the fairy tale can end in the secular, but can end empty-handed. So the hero or heroine comes back, but doesn't have anything to show. He has no object, he has no prize. The hero simply returns to the secular realm, either with nothing or simply the relief and joy of having escaped from the devouring unconscious. Or the hero or heroine can end in the secular, with something to show for it. The hero returns from the unconscious with an animal or game, a magical object, wealth, or wins the anima or animus figure. And that is the highest level of individuation. It starts from the lowest level within the story, where the hero or heroine is swallowed up by the unconscious, or he survives or comes back empty-handed, or they come back with some sort of prize, the highest prize of which is the anima or animus. Think of a Disney fairy tale when the prince gets the princess, the vice versa, princess gets the prince. And there's a conjunctio, a marriage that results, and there's a wholeness because the sought after other, the anima or animus, is brought back to the kingdom. So that's it for our brief video today. Please do sign up at our website, chironpublications.com. If you'd like to be on our newsletter list, we will let you know when each of these volumes come out and keep you updated with new books. Also, if you are part of a Jungian organization and would like the longer version of this, we have a 2-hour version for each of the volumes. Please let us know, contact us, and we can talk about setting that up with your organization. And lastly, of course, the books are available for purchase. You can get them from our website, chironpublications.com, or Amazon, or any of the typical bookstores. So thank you very much, and you have a good day. Bye-bye.